Thank you, Mitzi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Meghna Ranganathan, and I'm going to be chairing today's learning lab called Creating Space for Girls to Aspire, Negotiate, and Grow. This learning lab shares findings from the STRIVE study Parivartan by the International Center for Research on Women. The program uses the sport of kabaddi to empower young women and adolescent girls in a slum in the city of Mumbai. 15 participating girls were interviewed over a time period of 2 years, 3 times over, and this particular learning lab shares their stories. I'm going to also give you a biography of the two speakers. Shweta Bankar is a technical specialist at the International Center for Research on Women with a keen interest in programs empowering adolescent girls. She currently works on Parivartan and the other gender transformative programs engaging various stakeholders across government, corporates, and communities in Maharashtra, India. Martine Colombine is an associate professor in sexual health research at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She works with STRIVE partners in India, analyzing the processes of change in Parivartan for girls and the qualitative research nested within the Samatha and Samvedana Plus trials. Welcome to both Shweta and Martine, and I'll hand it over to both of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Meghna, and welcome to everyone. This is, in fact, the second STRIVE webinar we have on the Parivartan Plus. It's a sports mentoring program. About 2 years ago, Madhumita Das spoke about the changes we observed among the mentors running this sports program in a Mumbai slum. So very briefly, the mentors were the young women from the slum, and they were selected because they came from relatively gender-progressive families. All the girls had studied, the women, actually young women, had studied at least up to 10th and most of them up to 12th standard, and they weren't married by the age of 20. So we looked at their process of transformation and how Parivartan supported them to challenge gender norms, resulting in their increased mobility and self-expression. So these mentors acted as role models for the groups of adolescent girls and engaging them in sports. So now these athletes are the ultimate target audience of the program, and today we'll be looking at the changes we observed among them. So what did we see? By the end of the Parivartan program, athletes had higher aspirations for education and also for career options and newer and non-traditional career options. They gained life skills with which they could assert their views and change their personal relationships both at home and outside the home. So importantly, they also had support from their parents. So Shweta will tell you a little bit about the setting, the theory of change, and the components of the program, and I will then briefly review the research methods, and the rest of the presentation will explore how the girls achieved the changes I just mentioned. We'll also briefly look into the challenges. So over to Shweta.
Thank you, Martin, for setting the stage. Hello all. So now let's take a look at the physical setting of the slum. This is a slum in Mumbai with more than 600,000 population, mostly Muslim population with high levels of poverty. These are mostly migrants from mixed ethnic groups across the country, and they are daily wage workers and in cottage industries, and there is a part of this population which is on the periphery, which is involved into rag picking on the adjoining dumping grounds of this area. Looking at the social settings now, this is not anything different from any other low-income setting in India, with clear expectations of gender roles, which mainly are around women and girls should give priority to household chores, public spaces only for men and boys, women and girls are custodians of morality and family honor. Concerns about women's safety in public space are widespread, as there are high levels of harassment, as is reported in the study. Society condones teasing by boys, as girls are supposed to be at home and not visible in public spaces. This affects girls and young women in crucial ways, especially with access to education and this also pressures them to marry early in order to elevate the burden of keeping the girls pure by handing them over to in-laws unblemished. Now, when we actually started with the program, there was an introduction to sports for girls. Because once girls reach their menarche, it is a distant dream for them to play in this community. Engaging young girls and young women as their mentors in a program like this provides an opportunity for them to reflect and question the norms governing their lives. This further opens opportunities for developing skills, especially life skills, and also for making them aware of their bodies and their rights. Using kabaddi, which is a masculine wrestling sport in Asia, we brought these girls out of their homes and into a public space. The aim here was to trigger normative change as girls' participation in sports increases their visibility in the community and gives them the opportunity to claim space as a group. Now, when we actually began with this entire program, we developed a theory of change. And here we present a segment of the theory of change, mainly the assumptions and the underlying Parivartan mainly the assumption underlying the Parivartan Plus and the main components of the program. So we begin with an assumption that by participating in sports, girls will increase their confidence and self-esteem. By aspiring to a collective goal, they will learn negotiation skills and teamwork and become more powerful to claim space as a group. These competencies will transfer into individual lives and ultimately translate into continued education and delayed marriage. We were very clear when we began that we wanted this program to be implemented by the community. So we worked through Apnalaya, which is a local NGO who has been involved in community development for over 40 years and has credibility within this community. Through them, we recruited a group of young women who were positive deviants in the community with high levels of education, as Martin actually mentioned earlier. These women, young women, underwent intensive gender training so that they could act as role models and run the sports and reflective sessions for the girls. Social norms around women in public space are so entrenched that it was clear from the outset that we needed a component with the parents and also engage the entire community. This was based actually on the socio-ecological framework. So we included reflection groups with parents and engaged the community through involving key stakeholders who helped us further to mobilize the community to attend public education events and the tournaments of the groups of athletes. Talking about the program, we here begin with the sports component. We begin with mentors who were given a group of, each of these mentors was given a group of 10 to 15 girls. Now we'll talk a little about the sports component of this program to begin with. The sports program was designed in a way that it had a curriculum which had, the exercises and the introduction to the game, the introduction to concepts and the different components of kabaddi. There was a variety of reactions to these sessions when they actually began. Some girls were really excited about playing. Others were more reluctant and still others not playing at all. In this picture, you can see the sports attire. Again, this was not accepted from the word go. Many of them changed into track pants and t-shirts at the playgrounds, while others remained in salwar kameez the first couple of weeks while playing. But this changed gradually. The mentors were in shirts and pants, and the more reluctant girls did switch once it was clear to them that it was more comfortably playing in the sports attire rather than the salwar kameez. Within a few months, many walked out to the ground in their sports attire. They usually walked around 45 minutes through the heart of the community wearing their sports attire, and they were comfortable with it. The main point we would like to make here is that nobody forced these girls to change into the sports attire. They actually acted all on their own comfort level. So apart from the kabaddi each week, there was a day or an afternoon session on reflection. These were around reflecting on gender especially. The reflective sessions were designed in a way that helped the participants reflect on some critical issues like gender, gender-based discrimination, concepts of growing up, rights, marriage, and friendships in education, and other aspirations. They were also taught life skills in communication, negotiation, and strategizing. Whatever was covered in the card series in 1 week was practiced through role play and other activities in the week that came after that. In the beginning, the girls had expected these sessions to be all about kabaddi theory. Instead, they were about life aspirations, ways to achieve goals, and a place to learn from the mentor and each other. So they started to engage, and it became a space for them to express themselves, make friends, and practice skills. In combination with the sports sessions, this is where they also built confidence, realizing their physical strength and fitness levels and other abilities they had never explored before this. In this program, we actually started with giving visibility to the participating girls from the very beginning with an official launch in November 2014. This was an event which was it was launched in a public space in the community, and each of the mentors had their group perform either a dance or a song on the stage in the community space where the parents and the key stakeholders were the audience. There were 2 tournaments again held in the community, one during the program period in January 2016 and the other one 9 months after the completion of the program to mark their graduation in December 2016. These were public events with girls competing in front of the community. In the in-depth interviews, girls did report how these tournaments were beneficial to them on a personal level in gaining confidence. They felt that their families further accepted their participation in sports, and it had created space for themselves in the family and the neighborhood. Now, I hand this over to Martin to talk about the data set used for this presentation and start the process of change for girls being a part of the Parivartan program. Over to you, Martin.
Great, thank you. So our evaluation was totally qualitative through longitudinal case studies, as this was the first time girls from the community were engaged in a sports program, and this implied challenging social norms around what girls can and can't do. So in itself, it seemed a bit risky, and so that's why through this qualitative component, we were particularly interested in studying the different pathways and the processes of change, and to study how they engage with the Parivartan program and to understand how this was different for different girls. So in terms of data collection, we also did case studies with mentors, but that's separately, sort of 3 waves with mentors. But here also we selected 15 athletes who were interviewed 3 times. So soon after the program started, 8 months into the program, and also 9 months after completion, because we wanted to know whether the changes that they made during the program were sustained afterwards. So the program itself was more or less a year that they played kabaddi, a year to 15 months. So we selected these 15 girls. That was totally purposefully, and we asked the mentors to divide the girls in 3 categories. So girls who they perceived as current model participants, who were very engaged and demonstrated change. Then girls who hadn't changed at all, sort of in the very beginning. And then the third categories included those in complex situations that made it really difficult for them to change. All interviews were conducted in the ICRW field office, maintaining a comfortable and non-threatening environment, and they lasted more or less between 45 and 70 minutes. Most of them were done by Shweta herself with another colleague. So challenging norms starts at home. Actually, it all starts in the reflection sessions on gender, where girls had plenty of opportunity to reflect on the restrictions they experienced at home and in the community. It raised their awareness of not having aspirations for education and career, and as such, they started to realize the inequalities. They developed skills that helped them negotiate, which was first, they practiced these skills first with each other in the sessions. And once they started questioning the norms and expectations, they also needed to enroll their parents in the same way of thinking. So with the capabilities they gained during the sessions, they practiced their skills at home. So different girls had to adapt different strategies to remain part of the program to start off with, as there was an interplay with different external factors as well, so neighbors, parents, relatives, particular incidences in the communities, and, for example, injuries in the play sessions and so on. So with the mentors as role models who demonstrate the skills in the community, in particular the way they negotiated with the girls' participation with her parents during the consent and recruitment procedures, that really gave a model for the girls of how to negotiate themselves. So now Shweta will demonstrate how parent support was pivotal with a few quotes.
Thank you, Martin. Now, as we see on the screen, this quote illustrates how changing norms starts at home. Parents extending their support to their change was a major step forward to resisting the social sanctions from neighbors and relatives. Parents were in a position to resist the social pressure of their traditional reference group. As this quote states, this program has not only helped me understand why as a girl I'm treated differently from boys. It helped me to be assertive with my family in a way that they will understand what I'm asking for. Once my parents realized the importance, I did not bother about what others said. Now, this quote strongly suggests that parental support truly boosts the athlete's confidence, as the comments from community members are never to be neglected, but they landed differently. The next slide shows a quote from one of the athletes who was not having enough, she not just enough, but she did not have any family support for this change that she was going through in Parivartan. So it was not plain sailing for all the girls. So this is an athlete whose parents are not alive, and she lives with her brothers. Her life is governed by what her brothers say. When the Parivartan team actually approached her family for consent, her brothers did not agree to it. Her sister-in-law, who lives in the neighborhood, it's one of her cousin's wife, she actually gave in consent for her participation in the program, and her brothers did not know about her participation till she participated in the first tournament held in the public grounds in the community. Actually, her team was the winner at this first public tournament, and when she went home, her sister-in-law, who actually gave in the consent, tried to negotiate her participation in the program. Her brothers actually listened to her for a while and allowed her to be a part of the program, but she was not regular, as her priority was always the household chores and her sibling care. So now in this slide we see that these are some things. From now on we'll try to see what has actually motivated these athletes to bring about this change in them. So the first thing that the first point of contact that these athletes had were their mentors, and they were actually the main motivators, as they were role models for these young girls in the community. As we have already said, mentors are the positive deviants within the community, having achieved higher education and not being married till early 20s. They also had the intimate knowledge of restrictions, and this led to appropriate strategies for change within them, and then this percolated to the girls that they were mentoring. These mentors have actually negotiated greater freedom to move around in the community in order to be able to fulfill their mentor duties. The intensive gender training assisted them in great self-expression, something the athletes did not experience at home. They became really credible role models, as they were from within the community and knew best how to advise on negotiating strategies, as they intimately knew the restrictions and the potential backlashes if change was not introduced gradually. Mentors really were central in providing role models not just for the girls but also for their parents. They soon gained the parents' respect and also from others in the community. Again here, the credibility of Apnala cannot be stressed out. Many parents would not have taken the risk for their girls to participate if it had not been supported by Apnala. The relationship building between the mentors and parents of participating girls all started at the recruitment and consent procedure, which took really a long time. At the start, one of the program staff from Apnala helped assure parents that their daughters were at the right place. Afterwards, it was all down to the mentors who continued their regular contact with the parents, as every week they picked up girls from home to walk to the sports ground. As such, they became a part of the reference group for both the parents and the girls. And it seems that at least this did not change for a long time, even after the program was over. Another important factor that helped athletes bring about the change and sustain it was the support networks that they built during the entire project period. Many athletes received increased support at home, though it was not true for all. Beyond the home, a lot of practical support came from networking and interacting with mentors and co-athletes. Apart from the knowledge they gained, athletes felt supported by the resourcefulness of the group when they shared concerns and problems. As mentors and some of the athletes had been part of other initiatives run by Apnala and other NGOs and CBOs, there was a larger network to draw on for advice and information, and they gained access to other opportunities from other projects beyond Parivartan. There were instances of girls on the verge of dropping out due to family pressure, but with co-athletes going to their homes to convince their parents of how they personally benefited, resulted in their friend being able to stay. Again, it seems that as the reference group changes for both girls and their parents, the support follows naturally. As a result of this, some of the changes that were prominent and sustained even after the program were increase in mobility and visibility of the girls, increased educational and career aspirations, their communication changed, and they could negotiate their marriage. So let's take a look at some of the quotes and some of the changed trends that we have come to know from the interviews that we did with the athletes. So here in this slide, we see some quotes on being out in public space. The mobility of these girls was very restricted, and even going to school or shop for many was only possible with an escort, all out of fear of potential harassment and how that may affect the reputation of the girls and ultimately their families. Instances of harassment did not vanish with participation of the girls in this program. But with their skills and in the beginning moving in groups, they handled the harassment without any fear. Importantly, through these reflection sessions, they did not blame themselves for any harassment they experienced. There was progress throughout the program, where at first safety came in numbers, but later girls started going out to the reflective sessions and even to the sports grounds on their own if the mentor did not come to pick them up, and for some even without the co-athletes. So giving visibility to girls playing sports was built into the intervention design through the tournaments. But equally, if not more important, was their increased presence in street on the way to the sports ground and visibility through the everyday social interactions. It seems clear from the data that most concerns about safety are not just about physical safety, rather it is in the mind. Freedom from fear through increased confidence, rebuffing potential harassment without need for blame. Because girls effectively demonstrated empowerment at home, parents felt comfortable with them being to handle the street. Disapproval from neighbors was confronted or ignored by girls as well as their parents. So this slide now talks about the education and career aspirations. These quotes actually tell us what it was about, what education was all about before or in the first round of interviews with them, and then towards the end in the third round, they had a different thinking about their education and their aspirations. I would say that aspirations have definitely changed and girls are expressing their desire to continue with their education. They aspire to careers, not just the more traditional ones like being a teacher, a beautician, or a tailor, but also becoming something like an air hostess, which is not very acceptable in this community, as well as more masculine jobs like, being a police officer or even being engaged in sports. They are also vocal about their aspirations and negotiations at home to continue or get back into education. Through the networks they've built while in the program, they have also been in touch with other civil society organizations providing scholarship or financial help, and others providing vocational trainings, etc. But what has not changed much is the negative comments from neighbors and relatives on her marriageability and chastity. Some of the comments that these girls reported during their interviews, which were directed to them or their parents, are like, what do you have to do with so much of education? It will be difficult for you to find a boy suitable for marriage. Somebody also reported saying, this was directed to her parents, being out of the house will spoil her, and then one day she will spoil the name of the family. Being out will pull her into friends and then boyfriends. While comments like these kept coming, the effect was different. It did not result in the same restrictions they had before they actually joined the program. This could be, as is in this next slide, maybe because of the change in communication that these girls were having. Clearly, these girls were more assertive, and they clearly communicated to their family members. This was an important change. While in the first round of the interviews, girls reported that they were not expected to question anything that was happening in the house, and also not expected to communicate with the male family members, especially when they reached their puberty. So there was a struggle with many who had to give their parents assurances at every step and make efforts to gain their trust and counter threats of having to drop out from Parivartan sessions. In case of continuing education, girls had to assure their parents that they were not in relationship with any boy or any man. In these in-depth interviews, it is very clear how participants cherish these changes in communication as they talk with pride about the process of change. Of course, there is more to be done, especially around girls becoming a part of everyday decision-making process in their households. Another striking change that has been reported in these interviews, or the case study interviews, especially in the third one where it has been sustained, is they are being able to negotiate their marriage. Before being a part of this program, in the first round, they told us that, girls in this community had little say in the decisions around their marriage. But now, girls have gained this competency in the program, and it has transferred into negotiating even choice of their partner and timing of marriage. Girls are working with their families to make them realize that marriage is not the ultimate goal of their lives. Marriage is taken as a responsibility, and girls now take it to be a partnership with their spouse. They argue for being ready for marriage, bringing in their own contribution, that is, being able to financially support their family or take the different responsibilities. Now, Martin will conclude with reviewing the challenges. Martin, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So after this hopefully convincing demonstration of how girls' life changed, let us now look at the challenge, talk about the challenges. There were quite some major ones. Many of them got resolved, but not all. So not all girls could even participate. Although we recruited 150 girls as we got consent for their participation, and that process took much longer than we expected. There was a further initial drop-off, quite steep, in the first few months, and the main reasons were either lack of parental consent. Even if they had sort of signed consent, it was then the reality of what it meant going to the sports ground or something. Some people withdrew consent, some parents. Then it was they needed time for household chores, and girls. Then you also have things about the girls themselves. Some just don't enjoy playing kabaddi. And also there was engagement in other extra classes like tuition classes, the Quran, and other things. So of the 150 girls we received consent for, actually only 136 joined, and further drop-off in attention was to more or less an average of 80 attendance by the end. So we could say we just kept over half. We had planned the fathers group as well as a mothers group, but the attendance to the fathers group was too low to be tenable. Mainly it's because culturally, socially, the child rearing and issues around children's education are seen as the mother's role. The group with mothers was very useful in reinforcing the messages from the program. So while some fathers refused consent, others showed silent approval by letting their wives participate. It was the mother who then negotiated with the father, not successfully in all cases, as the final decision is still taken by fathers. But to conclude, although we would say that change happens in waves, if we have lost nearly half of those we planned to reach, we feel that this allowed bigger changes in those that remained. Through reflection and interacting with role models, these girls raised their aspirations, and they developed the competencies. They put this into practice at home, and this is what makes the change sustainable, because we really see by practicing these skills at home, they did change the family dynamics. And also, so while we have the program, and that's the curriculum, what also happened was this increased networking in the community and increased visibility in public spaces. And that's a very important component that, we sort of unearthed it through that we could clearly see this is the process that really built confidence by making these changes step by step. Some of these changes can't be undone anymore. Girls brought communication and negotiation home, and it changed the dynamics. Sorry, I said that already. The increased, by the end of the program, several proud fathers were actually ready to become champions or advocates. Once they saw their daughters perform at the public event, at the competition, they were really proud. And so although the fathers weren't ready to champion at the start of the program, they were advocates at the end. So we feel that we've built a large enough new reference group for these changes to become more acceptable in the community and diffuse to other families who weren't quite ready before. So we've come to the end of our presentation, and we want to thank you, and we also want to acknowledge the girls, the mentors, Apnalaya, and then other people in ICRW, Rafi Verma and Amadumita Das, and Strive, also Laurie Heisey and Ben Sislaji. Okay, so over to discussion.
So far, there isn't any question on the chat boxes. People are probably still thinking through them. I might pose a question just to get everyone thinking. It's sort of it's a question around the value add of sports associated with these reflection sessions. So I guess my question is, what is so special about having these girls part of a sport? Why don't you just keep it as having a reflection session? And related to that, what is so special about the sport of kabaddi? So if this was to be scaled to other parts of India or to other settings, do you see another sport playing a similar role? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Meghna, for this question. Okay, the value that this program, the sports component of this program got in was, there's a lot of shaming around our bodies. even though the reflection sessions were happening around discussion on growing up and our bodies, the girls could actually get this change about in a sport like kabaddi, because this is such a contact sport. It's almost like a wrestling sport wherein one girl goes into the territory of another 7 girls who have to defend themselves and catch hold of her. So it's a very contact sport. It's a wrestling sport in Asia that's played. So when such things happen, they happen to develop a lot of confidence about their bodies, they are at ease with their bodies, and this again helps further. Yes, there are experiments happening globally with all other sports as well. But with kabaddi, it being more of a contact sport, it helped us more, I would say. Of course, soccer and other sports are also helping equally to be, more confident about their bodies and more at ease with their physical health. So I hope, Meghna, this is answering what you wanted to know.
Yes, definitely. There are a couple of questions from the audience. Carol Wen has asked a question about she said that was there any risk to the mentors for working on these issues within the community? And if so, what type of support networks were built into the program? And she had a second question, which was also asked by another participant, another person from the audience, Bruce McKay, about what program. So if one of you can tackle these two questions.
Okay, I can talk about the risk to the mentors.
You do that, and I'll take Bruce's question. Okay.
Okay. So the risk to the mentors was mainly around, this was the first time they were trying to be so mobile in this community. Now, if you look at this particular community, it has pockets. Especially the periphery is very dangerous. You have a lot of substance use and men and boys, on the streets using substances. And as we reported earlier in the presentation as well, there's a lot of incidents of harassment. So now, when we chose these girls, the athletes, they were random. They were randomly selected from 4 pockets of the community. And some areas were really dangerous, and there were reports of harassment every now and then in those areas. Even though these mentors were from the same community, their families earlier did not allow them access to these areas. They were like restricted areas for them. But with the consent process, they had to go to the doorstep of every girl and get this consent and pass through these so-called dangerous areas. So there was a risk to the mentors in terms of mobility, being harassed. But with the gender trainings and all these reflective sessions that they went through before being a part of this program, before actually getting into the community to recruit girls as a part of Parivartan, they went through a series of trainings. So this helped them reflect and also in a way react or take care of themselves when they were out. Of course, there were timings when the girls were not at home and their parents were not available. They had to go to and fro, and this also counted a lot on their time. So their families were a little not very happy with the amount of time these girls, the mentors as young women, were spending out of their homes. So there were some of these risks as well. And yes, there was some risk while they were in the ground where, people would just pop in, talk about. As young women, they were talked about in the community and their neighborhood. So these were some risks that they faced, but they actually were in a position to face it and still get their roads out of, continue being a part of the program.
Okay, so let me answer a few of Bruce's questions. Actually, the cost, I don't know. I don't know whether Shweta, you know this of heart, but that might be a question we have to answer later. So Bruce says it's almost bound to have some effect. Yes, it does. How are we to judge the extent of the effect? Now that's obviously not a simple question. For us, this was very much a pilot project because we found it was risky, even if an idea was, shall we do a randomized control trial, and we knew that we wouldn't have the numbers, or just we expected a lot of trouble to get this through. So one way we can judge the extent of the effect is just looking at how more mobile they are, how much more they are allowed to get out of the house on their own in the street, because it's the restricted mobility that stops everything, that stops them from getting into education, continuing education, and so on. So for us, that's the measures that are important. We've also done some, and there's actually quite some interesting critiques on sports studies, because the whole assumption is that it's through building self-esteem and so on. And evaluations that have measured this have come out with sort of strange findings, because the girls don't particularly have low self-esteem to start off with. So often you're making them aware of inequalities. So that might actually initially give an effect of lower self-esteem and so on. So it's not tricky. It's not easy to measure an effect. But for me, it's like demonstrating the process of change. For me, that's much more convincing. And it can be, if people want to do RCTs, I think it's still very difficult to show what effect. I think the effect needs to be shown at parents' level, at permissions given, and so on, rather than on so-called psychological effects that sports bring in these girls. And obviously how many come back into education, and we can, I don't have this at the top of my head, but lots of the girls who were dropouts, school dropouts, got back into some kind of education, and that's the ultimate measure of progress, I would say. I saw another question. Great. Sorry.
Thanks, Mari. I can.
Yeah.
There's another question on
the sample,
on replicability and sustainability from Sarah Begg, who's from Cricket Without Boundaries in Yes, Tanzania, and she spoke about the reference girls, the 80-odd reference girls who form the reference group. And so, what are your next steps, particularly with regards to them, and in terms of sustainability, replicability, and scalability?
Shweta, do you want to say something on this?
Yeah, I would actually.
Can you speak a bit louder, because I just saw that, Bruce, apparently you're coming out quite quiet.
With the sustainability, replicability, and scalability, what has happened is the partner NGO that we had in this community, Apnalaya, looking at the results that we've had of Parivartan, has actually started another sports-based program with kabaddi itself. And they have actually taken these girls who have been a part of this Parivartan program to be sort of, the mentors are the TOTs, the trainers for the mentors in the program that's coming up in Apnalaya. And they are also providing inputs to the program as and when they are asked for. The athletes are those girls. Now what has happened, this community is very close-knit, especially these pockets from which these girls have been recruited. So these girls and the changes in the athletes have been a mark for other parents to allow their girls to be a part of this program that Apnalaya has started after Parivartan. So it was very easy for them to have consent from the parents, from the neighborhood of these girls, because they've already seen the changes in girls who've participated in Parivartan, and now this program called Khula Asman by Apnalaya is going well, in reference also to trying to acknowledge the change and the different positions these girls and the mentors have acquired in the community as a part of being a part of Parivartan. Martin, would you like to add something to this?
No. I think that's fine. I just saw this question from Carol about how much training the mentors got in facilitating the sessions. Could you also respond to that? Yeah.
I can do that. So when we started with this program and the mentors were recruited, they had a 5-day residential training on the concepts of gender. This included gender discrimination, gender-based violence, and all other issues that were related to gender and how this impacted their lives. It was more of a reflective session, and it was all activity-based. So this was the first training that they had before even they entered the community to recruit the girls. And then, as the session started, we had some refresher trainings at 3 points of time, 2 days each, looking at the curriculum that they should be addressing with the athletes for their respective groups. So these were the trainings with the issues, and they also happened to have periodical inputs of kabaddi trainings and how it should be going ahead by the state level Kabaddi Association and their representative who helped us out with the training with mentors.
Great. There's another question that I can see from Bruce, which is around the sampling. And the question is, was the sample for the evaluation taken from the 136 who started, or from the 80
Yes.
who completed?
From the 136 that started, because it's case study, so we did it prospectively. So we looked at the first few sessions, and those that were really difficult, that didn't react. We had 5 girls who showed change in the start, who didn't show change, 5 who didn't show change, and then 5 who obviously had very difficult circumstances at home. And because the mentors had a very good perspective on it, because they were involved in the recruitment of these girls, so they could gauge where the parents were reluctant or so on. So yeah, that's how we did it.
Great, but related to that, I had a question about a point that you made around the challenges, where you said that you lost a number of girls, but that you allowed bigger changes in those that did participate. So can you sort of expand on that a bit?
Yeah, so, that's sort of a learning that we have from doing this program. It's like, we put an awful lot of effort to get these 150 girls, and then there is the drop-off, and you feel like, oh my God, so we've only kept 70 or 80, sorry. And in a way, it is, it's not the first gender program in this community. It's not the first program that tries to keep girls in school. So you know that people are changing anyway. And it is all about these positive deviants and those that are ready to change. So we feel that, okay, we now drawn on those who are ready to change at this time. And we feel we've achieved more by, we wouldn't, next time we do this, we wouldn't particularly sort of really try to get everyone. Take the ones that are ready to change and give visibility to the changes. Because at the tournaments, we had parents who had initially not given consent, who said, we now want our girls to participate in this program. And obviously that was towards the end of the program. But you see that, people need more models from within the community. And that's why we think it was so important to draw the mentors from the community to show that these are examples. This is not, these families were respected, and the mentors were respected by the end were respected by the community, by the neighbors, and so on. So does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. I guess another question that also popped up is that I was thinking of is, in terms of the theoretical framework that you're using, just briefly, can you tell us what were the theories that you drew on?
Right. Shall I take this, Shweta?
Please go ahead, Martin.
So basically, Strive has been wanting to look at social norms, how we can change sort of structurally the social norms that impede the individual's agency to change. So we've been looking at social norm theory and sort of the ideas of the reference group and how to change sort of a small group of the community that definitely very much comes from the social norm theory. And but also with these norms and restricted mobility, from gender theory, particularly gender performance theory, we sort of look at the symbolic meaning of girls in public spaces, and also gender relational theories. Connell is sort of very important that what we feel between agency and structure, it is all about that social interaction, social relationships, the day-to-day interactions. That's how social norms get reproduced. So it's very much that focus on changing little bits of behavior, starting negotiations and arguing, and how people then interact with people on the street, like rebuff the teasing from the boys and so on. It's like it's there that change can happen, sort of there that you initiate the structural change of changing a social norm. It's all happening in those day-to-day social relationships.
Any thoughts on how you would then reach the more vulnerable girls at the second stage of the program? This is related to the sampling question we were discussing earlier.
Well, as I said, I think, there's always girls who won't be able to reach until parents are ready, until others are ready. And I also think another issue is not everyone likes kabaddi. There might have to be, other pulls to the program, other activities. Not everyone will like sports. So when you further this, and if there's more funding, by different civil society organizations and so on, I think, as we saw in communities like that, there are several things going on, and it's sort of finding a good basis here. Sports was great because it in itself really challenges a gender norm that girls don't play sport. But not everyone will want to play sport. And hopefully, because the models are there, you will affect more families. Shweta, is there anything you want to add to that?
One point I would like to, a few things that I was just noting down maybe that could be supportive to what you said, Martin. One was maybe trying to create a need base from the parents of these vulnerable girls. The family telling us what we need to do and where and what are the things that we need to address. Secondly, from the existing program, we could also acknowledge the change in the girls and these families, sort of acknowledge and show them up so that they are reflected out they stand out in the community, and people or girls or families who are more vulnerable could actually try to relate more to these changed people. And then these role models should be made really, and both athletes and mentors who are a part of this Parivartan program could be made more visible. So, that role modeling concept could really be a very effective tool in reaching out to the vulnerable population. These are just some of my thoughts that I'm gaining, while this conversation is just happening. I hope it does relate to what you've been asking, and it answers a little bit of the question as well.
Great. Thank you, Shweta. There's a question from Bruce around engaging boys. And the question is, did you consider combining this with efforts to change boys' norms?
Yeah. So basically, when we started with this program, this is, actually a continuation of our previous program with boys that was against sports-based with cricket and was named Parivartan for Boys. So those were that was the program which really addressed in the same community some of the norms that were governing the lives or actions of boys and men in this community. Of course, even as a part of this program, we try to engage the community as a whole, in which the boys and men again were a part, and we tried to do this through the community mobilization program we had, and where there were reflections on what's happening in the community and what what was safe, what was unsafe for these girls in the community, and why was this happening. So we try to engage men and boys in this part of the program as well as the community component. But previous to this program, we had another boys program which was cricket based, and it was for the men and boys in the community, which was again a role modeling based program. And that program very well talked and helped boys and men reflect on the norms governing their lives and actions.
Yeah, I would just add to that ideally that there are the gender synchronized approaches. We know that if we change girls without changing boys, you have less possibility of success. But it goes even further, I think. It's not just boys and girls, but it's also the families and sort of other programs that we've seen on gender transformation like SASA. It's working at the community level. And here we also deliberately actually didn't run a parallel program with the boys because we had run one before. This was this was a step up because for boys playing sports, they play sports already, and it was then changing the gender attitudes through that. I think coming back from that, I think it is more effective actually to bring the girls to break those norms. For them who are, being discriminated against, let's say, because they can't play sport, let them play sport. And we do see that boys did change. They were still teasing the girls, but the girls reacted differently. So for us it was sort of a pilot to see whether the change could come about through working with girls and with their parents, alongside the parents, that we feel we kind of did address norms. The norms are there in the society, and they will change if one part of the society changes. But it takes time.
Very excellent timing. That's excellent timing. Thank you all for a very interesting presentation. Thanks both Shweta and Martin, and thanks to everyone for some really interesting questions. We hope you can join us for the next Learning Lab over November and December. Thank you.